So this was the title that Joachim gave me, and I have to think about it and chew it a bit. And I say, okay, I can talk about that, but I will also talk a little bit of on my personal historical view on the HPV reflections here. And I joined the HPV Research in 1988. That was in Malmö with Bengt-Göran Hansson, who had a project, and I know nothing about papillomavirus, but he was gentle and he said, you can learn. So, and that is, as all of you know, we all learn all the time in this field. And then I thought, what was going on in Sweden in the HPV Research 88? Yeah. And I will also say that I split up this talk in these decades. I can do that because I've been around in decades. So a little bit of future as well in the end. I hope that some of the people here should be in the audience, and they are. At that time, we didn't have the PCR or anything. We had to do the analysis with HPV antigen detection, and for looking after the virus, there was also this in situ hybridization going on. And I'm interested in this because I'm a biomedical laboratory technologist. So I'm interested in methods. Anyway, Peter Bestoletti, which was mentioned here before by Christina, he was looking at papillomavirus and its presence after treatment. And he also had these studies of the males. Was the HPV present among the males, among their partners who had been treated? And Geo van Krogh, as you know, he was very active in research on the genital papillomavirus genital warts. And Eva Rylander was also doing research on HPV in the vulva here. So this is what I found. What was going on in the south of Sweden in this time? Well, we had a study where we wanted to know how common is HPV among males. And this was quite an interesting study. As you can see, this was young, healthy males. They were actually asked to be part of the study, and they were looked for acetocyte lesions, and if there were, a biopsy was taken from these males. And that could be done in these times. So they were still into the study. And then we have to do, they was doing Southern blot, and that was a study that Anders Järpe introduced, a commercial test that he was promoting actually. But we also added HPV PCR testing here. And the method was that we have type-specific primers for 5 types. And we did PCR 30 cycles at this time. And the PCR products were then blotted to filters. And we have to label probes, quite a lot of work. And then we have to do hybridizations and washings. And we didn't know what was happening in the reactions, of course. We had to put these blots into the freezer for 3 days. So we have to go home and wait for 3 days, and then we took it out. And then we went down to the radiology and developed the films. And then we could see that it looks as it did at the right spot of the picture here. An interesting thing here is also the machine that we used for PCR. You heard that you were talking about this PCR in Umeå in the early days. That was by having heat, adding this cleanup polymerase, right, and so on. But we had a machine that could do this automatically, heating and lowering the temperature. But as you can see, it was not labeled PCR machine. It was labeled programmable dry block. So I think that was for some patent issues. They couldn't put PCR on the machine. And this machine here was used, and actually to get it down in temperature, it was cooled by water. And as you know, we are in the south of Sweden. We have a lot of calcium in the water. And as you know, what happened with the coffee machine, you have to remove the calcium after a while. So this has to be done every half a year. We have to do this, otherwise the PCR was not good. So it was in the old days. And what else did we do? We looked, then in the early 90s, we looked at the female teenagers that had condyloma or had a condyloma and compared it to a control group. And as you can see on the top graph there, HPV was found in 70% in the urethra of the ones with condyloma and 16% of the controls. And then we wondered, could it be possible to use urine after this finding? That could be a good sample to trace or to detect HPV. So that we went on with, and we looked at healthy military conscripts, and there we could find urine, 5% were positive, and the urethra was a little bit higher, 8%. And we also looked at the colposcopy clinic, there we could find HPV in 38% of the urine samples, but the cervical samples was better, 49%. Anyway, urine, there was a potential that urine could be used, and it has been used for some epidemiological studies, but not really for the clinical diagnostics yet. But we were working on that at that time. Yeah. So. And there was, at this time, there was a study going on to look for the, so to say, baseline of HPV among the screening women in Malmö. And they were 20 to 29 years old. And this study was initiated by I must mention these three people here that work together here. We had Bengt Bjerre, who is a legendary, or was a legendary gynecologist, and he was introducing the screening in Malmö, Skåne, 1st of January 1966, same as in Stockholm. So he was very early in this. And concerning HPV, I remember he said that the discovery of HPV was the most exciting thing that happened during my career. So he was impressed by that. And then Bengt-Jan Hansson is a virologist and who was taking the PCR to the Malmö laboratory and promoted a molecular biology diagnostics. And then Karin Lindholm is a cytologist, pathologist, who was also very much involved in the quality issues of cytology. So these three people came together and could start this study. And then what else? Yeah, we've been also very active in the typing issue. And typing HPV was at this time a quite difficult task. And we invented a method where we could type actually 25 types in one sample. And I looked at the conclusions from this study, and I said it was a fast and easy method. And at that time it maybe was, but what we had to do this filter with all the clones of the different HPV types, took a couple of times to do all these replicas that we had to use. So we had then to make a PCR, and then we have to hybridize it to this membrane, wash, and then we have to put on a film and look at the film. And now I have a duty to you here. The technology, laboratory technology people. So what kind of HPV type was it in this sample? 45. Correct. Very good. You remember well. Good. And now the radioactive labeling system was gone. Now we could use chemiluminescence instead. So here you can see Kia and Johanna, who is doing the typing actually. And sometimes these lids were stuck, and you have to bring in more people to open the lid. And really tough work, I must say. And Carina, you have done this as well, I suppose. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. And we also looked at RNA in different degrees of lesions, HPV 16 RNA actually, and we could already, during this period here, 97, we published a paper where we could see that there was more HPV 16 RNA in high-grade lesions than in low-grade lesions or normal cytology. And as you know, today we have a commercial test that is detecting HPV mRNA in the sample. So we were quite early here. Okay, now I'm coming more to this important workshop that was held in a castle outside Eslöv. And Joachim, this was 94, not 93. And it was a small group of people who were interested in the subjects here, who were gathered in this castle. And one of the many subjects here was that was discussed was HPV, infection dysplasia, role for HPV testing in the cervical cancer screening, and an aim was also to form a consensus for a Swedish multi-center study of HPV testing and screening, as you mentioned before, Joachim. And I talked to Bengt-Jan Hansson, who was there, and so on. And here you could see, I don't have the real program from the meeting. That I cannot be found anymore. But this is a list of people who, I think most of them were there actually. And some of them are still in the hall here, and some are not with us anymore, unfortunately. So these were the founders of the Swedish screen, actually. And I will talk too much of this study, but as you know, it was the first randomized clinical trial on primary screening, and supported by Cancer Foundation. And 12,527 women were recruited to the study, and they were then followed by this NKCX registry. And a little bit about the logistics in this study. The black circles here is the sites where the women were recruited from. And as you can see here in the middle of the table, samples from Uppsala, Gothenburg, and Malmö, they were tested in Malmö. Stockholm, they were tested in Stockholm, Umeå, and Umeå. And then we wanted to do typing as well. And after the PCR was done, and if it was positive, then an aliquot of the PCR product was sent frozen to Malmö. And then we continue again with this reverse dot plot hybridization. So some of the heavy work was done in the lab in Malmö again. So we have to do 437 typings actually. So that was the logistics of it. And here is a little bit of the baseline data from the study. And we could see that 7% of the women were HPV positive with high-risk types, and HPV 16 was the most prevalent type. And then adding an HPV test to the Pap test reduced the incidence of CIN2 plus of cancer in subsequent screening rounds. That was one of the conclusions. And Pontus, you had that in your thesis. That was an important paper. And I looked now the 25th of March, and it was actually cited 811 times. So that's a lot in this respect. And also, this switch screen, it came out that the primary HPV DNA-based screening with cytology triage and repeat HPV DNA testing of cytology negative women appears to be the most feasible cervical screening strategy. And then we jump to the next decade. We also looked at the baseline for the HPV types in condyloma before the vaccination program was really in place in Sweden. And we could see that 94% of the condylomas were HPV positive, and there was a lot of types there. 35 different types were present in these condylomas. And a little bit about the future here. You know, all women are not taking part in the cervical screening, so self-sampling could be one method to improve the coverage here. And we have looked in this, and one study was published in 2013, and we could see that the sensitivity of the self-sample was 77% to find severe dysplasia. And then we looked at also if we could use the mRNA test for this purpose. And then we published one validation in 2018, and then we had a sensitivity of 85%. And now we improved that method a bit, and now we are actually up to 95% of a self-sample test to find severe dysplasia, which is quite good. So hopefully we can publish this soon. Now we're coming to the clinical diagnostics here, or screening. HPV primary screening was introduced early 2017 in the Skåne, so we were quite quick to do it. And we used the Aptima mRNA test to perform the screening, and the women are, they are 30 to 65. If they're not showing up at 65, they get calls until they are 70. And if they're not coming then we say goodbye. So a little bit about the results here. So we have an overall prevalence in the screening of 7% were HPV positive, and the ASCUS plus or worser was 3.1%. And here you can see the blue line here is the percent of HPV stratified to the age groups here. And the orange is ASCUS plus cytology. And also we compare the cytology that was done during 2016 compared to the HPV primary 2017 that was triaged with cytology. Were there any difference? Well, we could compare the women 30 to 65 years, 2016, compared to 2017. And 2016, there was 3.5% of the women that was ASCUS plus with a routine classical cytology screening. And with the primary screening, there was 3.7%. Actually, no difference. So we were happy with this result, that the cytology seems to, the HPV primary screening seems to be sensitive enough. So I think that the Swedish screen studies contributed a lot, that we could get these new guidelines that the primary HPV screening was recommended for cervical screening in 2017. And as you heard before, I also repeat this, that the collaborative attitudes among the Swedish researchers have gained the gynecological cervical screening in Sweden. So I would say thanks to all of you that you contributed to this achievement. And as a virus, some of us have cleared, but some do persist. And it's very good to have persistence in this respect, actually, so we could have the quality. And thanks to you there, dear Karina. And, but we're not finished yet, so the journey continues and we go forward. And I joined this HV project, Research 88, and here is a lot of people that has been around in Malmö, so this is from the south perspective. So from 88 to 2015, all of these people contributed to the Malmö HPV laboratory research. So thanks to all of them. Maybe, I hope I have not forgotten anyone, but hope not. So I leave it with that. Thank you so much.